The blood from Katherine Daniels' split lip dripped onto the dirty floorboards of the Silver Spur Saloon as she crawled on hands and knees toward the swinging doors. Her fingers, once nimble enough to deal cards with lightning precision, now trembled as they clawed at the sawdust-covered planks. Behind her, the cruel laughter of Jasper Ward, the saloon owner who had just beaten her for refusing his advances, echoed through the suddenly silent room. Georgetown, Colorado Territory, 1876, was no place for a woman without protection. Katherine had learned that lesson painfully over the 6 months since her father's death had left her destitute and desperate enough to take a job dealing faro at the Silver Spur. "Where do you think you're going, girl?" Jasper bellowed, his voice thick with whiskey and rage. "You signed a contract. You belong to this establishment." Katherine didn't look back. She'd rather die in the street than spend another night under Jasper's roof. The contract she'd signed, which she now realized had been deliberately confusing, had trapped her in a form of indentured servitude. Tonight was supposed to be the final payment of her father's gambling debts, but Jasper had other plans that involved her warming his bed. As she reached the batwing doors, a shadow fell across her path. Through swollen eyes, she looked up to see a tall figure silhouetted against the fading daylight. The man stepped inside, and the saloon fell completely silent. Blake Prescott stood just inside the doorway, his hand resting casually on the grip of his Colt. He'd been riding into town when he heard the commotion from inside the saloon. What he found made his blood boil. A woman crawling toward freedom, her face bruised and bleeding. "This ain't your concern, Prescott," Jasper snarled, reaching for the shotgun he kept beneath the bar. Blake's voice was quiet but carried across the room like thunder. "The lady seems eager to leave your establishment, Ward." "She's got debts to pay," Jasper argued, his face flushed, "and ways to pay them." Blake looked down at Katherine. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, or the silent understanding between two souls who had seen too much hardship. With one fluid motion, Blake threw a leather pouch onto a nearby table. The distinct clink of gold coins filled the tense silence. "That should cover any legitimate debts," Blake said evenly. He extended his hand toward Katherine. "You walk free from here, miss." Katherine stared at his outstretched hand, hardly believing what was happening. Freedom, offered by a stranger with kind eyes that contradicted his dangerous appearance. She placed her trembling fingers in his calloused palm, and he gently helped her to her feet. Jasper stepped forward, face contorted with rage. "She ain't going nowhere." "I believe she is," Blake countered, his hand still on his gun. "Unless you'd prefer to discuss this further." The deadly quiet in his voice made the threat unmistakable. Jasper's gaze flickered between Blake's steady hand and the determined set of his jaw. Whatever he saw there made him reconsider. He spat on the floor but backed away. "Take the whore then," he muttered. "She ain't worth the trouble." Blake's eyes flashed dangerously, but Katherine squeezed his arm, silently pleading with him not to escalate the situation. With a slight nod, he guided her toward the door. "My things," Katherine whispered. "I have a room upstairs." "I'll send someone for them," Blake assured her. "Right now, we need to get you to a doctor." As they stepped into the fading light of the Colorado evening, Katherine finally allowed herself to breathe. She didn't know this man, didn't know his intentions, but anything was better than the hell she was leaving behind. "Thank you," she managed through her split lip. "But I have nothing to repay you with." Blake looked down at her, his expression softening. "I'm not looking for repayment, miss. Some things a man does because they need doing, that's all." Katherine nodded, wincing at the pain that shot through her head. As they made their way down the dusty Main Street, she wondered what twist of fate had brought this stranger to her rescue. and whether she had truly found freedom or merely exchanged one form of bondage for another. What she couldn't know then was that this moment crawling from darkness into light, placing her trust in a man she'd just met, would change the course of her life forever. Blake Prescott had been riding for days, the dust of the trail clinging to every inch of him. Georgetown hadn't been his destination, but the sound of trouble had pulled him in like a moth to flame. Now, with this injured woman leaning against him as they walked toward Doc Miller's office, he wondered if perhaps fate had other plans for him after all. "I'm Blake," he said softly, supporting her weight as she stumbled. "Blake Prescott." "Katherine Daniels," she replied, her voice barely audible, "though most call me Kate." "Well, Miss Kate, let's get you taken care of." Doc Miller's office was a small clapboard building at the end of the main street. The elderly physician opened the door before they even knocked, clearly having witnessed their approach through his front window. "Jasper Ward's handiwork, I presume?" he asked grimly, helping Katherine to a chair. Blake nodded. "She needs tending, Doc, and you'll be paying." Doc Miller raised an eyebrow. "I will," Blake confirmed without hesitation. While the doctor cleaned Katherine's wounds and checked for broken bones, Blake waited outside on the porch, rolling a cigarette between his fingers but never lighting it. His mind wandered to the events that had led him here, to this town he'd never planned to visit. 3 years as a deputy marshal had left him weary of violence and death. He'd turned in his badge 6 months ago after a gunfight had gone wrong, leaving a young bystander dead. The boy's face still haunted his dreams. Now he drifted, taking odd jobs and keeping to himself, trying to outrun memories that followed like shadows. The door opened and Doc Miller stepped out. "She's resting. Nothing broken, thankfully, but she's badly bruised. That girl's had a rough time since her father passed." Her father, Edward Daniels, came here during the silver boom like most, decent man but had a weakness for gambling. Died owing Jasper a considerable sum. Doc Miller shook his head. "Kate's been working it off ever since." Blake's jaw tightened. "And Jasper decided to take more than money." "It was bound to happen," Doc Miller sighed. "No safe place for her now in Georgetown. Jasper has too many friends in low places." She mentioned belongings at the saloon. Doc Miller nodded. "I'll send my boy to fetch them. You staying in town?" Blake hadn't planned to, but looking through the window at Katherine's battered face, something shifted inside him. For now, hotel's full with the mining convention. Mrs. Abernathy rents rooms above the mercantile. Blake thanked him and stepped back inside. Katherine was sitting up, holding a cold compressed to her face. Her eyes met his, wary but grateful. "Doc says you'll mend," Blake said, removing his hat. "Thanks to you," she replied. "Why did you help me, Mr. Prescott? You don't know me." Blake considered the question. "Some things don't require knowing someone, just being human." Katherine studied him, her gaze unexpectedly penetrating despite her injuries. "Most men in these parts wouldn't agree with that sentiment." "I'm not most men," Blake said simply. "And I've seen enough injustice to last several lifetimes." A small smile touched her lips, then faded as reality set in. "I can't stay in Georgetown. Jasper won't let this go." "Where will you go?" Katherine looked down at her hands. "I don't know. I have no family, no money." Blake made a decision then that would alter the course of both their lives. "I'm headed to Denver. You're welcome to ride along, at least until you figure things out." "Why would you do that?" Suspicion colored her voice. "Because you need help and I can offer it," Blake said. Then, reading her concern, he added, "With no strings attached, Miss Daniels. You have my word." Katherine weighed his offer against her limited options. Stay in Georgetown and face Jasper's vengeance, or trust this stranger who had already saved her once. "When do we leave?" she finally asked. "First light." Best put some distance between us and the Silver Spur." As Blake left to arrange lodging for the night, Katherine watched him go, wondering about the man behind those troubled eyes. He carried himself like someone accustomed to command, yet seemed to be running from something. Much like herself, for the first time in months, Katherine felt a flicker of hope. Tomorrow would bring a new beginning, away from the saloon that had become her prison. Whether Blake Prescott would be part of that future remained to be seen. But for tonight, she allowed herself to believe in the possibility of something better. The dawn broke cold and clear over the mountains surrounding Georgetown. Blake had risen well before first light, checking on his horse and purchasing supplies for the journey. By the time he returned to Doc Miller's, Katherine was awake and dressed in the simple clothes retrieved from her room at the saloon. "Not much," she said apologetically, gesturing to the small bundle that contained all her worldly possessions. "Makes for lighter traveling," Blake replied with a slight smile. Doc Miller insisted on checking Katherine one last time before they departed. "The swelling's down, but you'll be sporting those bruises for a while yet," he told her. "Take it easy on the trail." Blake settled their account, adding extra for the doctor's kindness. Outside, his horse stood saddled alongside a smaller mare. "I arranged for the mare," Blake explained. "Figured you'd prefer your own mount." Katherine touched the horse's velvety nose. "She's beautiful, but I can't consider it a loan," Blake cut in. "You can return her when you're settled." They mounted up as the first rays of sunlight gilded the mountain peaks. As they rode past the Silver Spur, Katherine kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, though Blake noticed her shoulders tense. Jasper Ward watched from the doorway, his expression thunderous. "This ain't over, Prescott," he called out. Blake merely tipped his hat and continued riding, keeping his horse positioned between Katherine and the saloon, until they reached the edge of town. The trail to Denver would take them through rugged mountain country, but Blake chose a longer route that followed gentler terrain, mindful of Katherine's injuries. They rode in comfortable silence for the first few hours, each lost in their own thoughts. By midday, they stopped to rest near a clear mountain stream. Katherine eased herself off the mare, wincing slightly. "I should have considered that riding might aggravate your injuries," Blake said, concern evident in his voice. "I'll manage," Katherine assured him. "I'm tougher than I look." Blake nodded. "I believe that. You'd have to be to survive what you did." They sat on sun-warmed rocks by the stream, sharing a simple meal of jerky, hardtack, and dried apples. Katherine studied her companion openly for the first time. In the harsh mountain light, she could see the fine lines around his eyes and the strands of silver at his temples that belied his otherwise youthful appearance. He couldn't be much past 30, she guessed, but he carried himself with the weight of someone who had seen far more than his years suggested. "You were a lawman," she said suddenly, surprising herself with the observation. Blake looked up sharply. "How did you figure that?" Katherine shrugged. "The way you stand, how you're always aware of your surroundings, and there's the fact that Jasper knew your name though you clearly aren't a regular at his establishment." A ghost of a smile crossed Blake's face. Observant. "Yes, I was a deputy U.S. Marshal, not anymore." "Why not?" The smile vanished. "Some stories aren't fit for pleasant company, Miss Daniels." Katherine looked down at her bruised hands. "I think we're past pretending either of us is particularly pleasant company, Mr. Prescott. And if we're going to be traveling together, you might as well call me Kate." Blake regarded her for a long moment, then nodded. "Kate it is." He paused, then added, "I left the Marshal Service after a job went wrong. A boy died who shouldn't have." The simple statement contained volumes of pain. Kate didn't press for details. Everyone had their ghosts, she understood that better than most. "And now," she asked instead, Now I take odd jobs, ranch work mostly, hunting guide sometimes. Blake tossed a pebble into the stream. Living day to day sounds lonely. It can be, he admitted, but it's simpler that way. Kate understood that sentiment too well. After her father's death, she had withdrawn into herself, finding it easier to avoid connections that would inevitably lead to more pain. "What about you?" Blake asked. "What's your story, beyond what I saw at the saloon?" Kate sighed, watching the water rush over smooth stones. "My father brought us west when I was 16. My mother had died, and he thought a fresh start would do us good. He had dreams of striking it rich in the silver mines." "Did he?" "No. He found enough to keep us going, but never the bonanza he hoped for. Then the cough took hold of him, miner's consumption. He couldn't work, started gambling to make ends meet." Kate's voice grew tight. "When he died, Jasper was quick to inform me of the debts. Said I could work them off dealing cards. And you had no other options. A woman alone in a mining town." Kate gave a bitter laugh. "My choices were the saloon or the brothel. At least dealing cards kept me on the right side of the bar, or so I thought." Blake's expression darkened. "Until Jasper wanted more," Kate nodded. "Yesterday was supposed to be my final payment. Instead, he informed me that the interest on my debt required additional services." She unconsciously touched her bruised cheek. "I refused." "Good for you," Blake said softly. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something passed between them, understanding, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit. The moment was broken by the distant sound of hoofbeats. Blake was on his feet instantly, hand on his gun. "Riders coming." "3, maybe 4, he said, his voice suddenly all business. "Get behind those rocks." Kate didn't argue. She scrambled for cover while Blake positioned himself with a clear view of the trail. 4 men appeared around the bend, riding hard. Kate's heart sank as she recognized Jasper Ward at the lead, flanked by 3 of his regulars, men known for their quick tempers and quicker triggers. "Prescott," Jasper called out as they reined to a halt. "Fancy meeting you here." Blake stood his ground, seemingly relaxed, but Kate could see the tension in his shoulders. "Following us, Jasper? That seems like a lot of trouble for a debt you've been paid for," Jasper sneered. "The girl made a fool of me in my own establishment. That kind of disrespect can't go unanswered in my line of work." "She's not going back," Blake stated flatly. "Oh, I don't want her back," Jasper said, his voice dripping with malice. "Damaged goods now, but I do want satisfaction." "You've been paid," Blake repeated. Jasper laughed, an ugly sound. "Not that kind of satisfaction." His hand drifted toward his holster. "Draw, lawman, or are you still gun-shy after what happened in Pueblo?" Kate saw Blake flinch at the mention of Pueblo. Whatever had happened there, it was the wound that still bled. "I'm not looking for trouble, Ward," Blake said evenly. "Take your men and go home." "Not without teaching you both a lesson," Jasper snarled. "Boys, take the girl. I'll handle Prescott." As 2 of the men dismounted and started toward Kate's hiding place, Blake's hand moved with blinding speed. His first shot struck one man in the shoulder, spinning him around. The second caught Jasper's horse, causing the animal to rear and throw its rider. "Kate, run!" Blake shouted, diving for cover as bullets began flying. Kate bolted for the horses, but one of Jasper's men intercepted her, grabbing her arm with bruising force. She fought back, driving her knee upward with all her strength. The man howled and doubled over, allowing her to break free. Blake was exchanging fire with Jasper and the remaining gunman, pinned down behind a boulder. Kate knew she should run, should save herself, but instead she grabbed the rifle from their mare's saddle scabbard. Taking careful aim, just as her father had taught her long ago, she fired. The bullet struck the rock inches from Jasper's head, sending stone fragments into his face. He yelled in pain and surprise. The distraction gave Blake the opening he needed. 2 quick shots later, Jasper's remaining companion was clutching his leg, and Jasper himself was disarmed, his gun spinning away across the ground. Blake emerged from cover, his expression grim as he kept his Colt trained on the wounded men. "It's over, Jasper," he said. "You've lost 3 men and accomplished nothing." Blood trickled down Jasper's face from the stone cuts. "I'll see you both dead for this," he spat. "No, you won't," Blake replied calmly. "Because if I ever see you again, I'll kill you. That's not a threat. It's a promise from a man who's very good at keeping them." Something in Blake's voice must have finally penetrated Jasper's rage. He looked from Blake to Kate, who still held the rifle with steady hands and seemed to recalculate his odds. "Help your friends onto their horses," Blake ordered. "And ride back to Georgetown. If you're smart, you'll forget we exist." For a tense moment, Kate thought Jasper might refuse. Then, with a muttered curse, he began helping his wounded companions mount up. "This isn't finished," he said as he climbed onto his own horse. "Yes, it is," Kate spoke up, surprising herself with the steel in her voice. "You have no power over me anymore, Jasper. I'm free of you and that saloon forever." Jasper's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more. With a jerk of his reins, he led his battered group back toward Georgetown. As the sound of hoofbeats faded, Kate lowered the rifle, suddenly aware that her hands were shaking. Blake approached slowly, his expression unreadable. "That was a fine shot," he said quietly. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My father," Kate replied, trying to steady her breathing. "He said a woman should know how to protect herself in these territories." Blake nodded, taking the rifle gently from her hands. "He was right." A pause, then. "Thank you, you might have saved my life." Kate met his gaze. "We saved each other." Something changed between them in that moment, a shift from rescuer and rescue to something more balanced, more complex. "We should move on," Blake said, breaking the spell. "They might think better of retreating and circle back." They mounted quickly and rode hard for several hours, putting as much distance as possible between themselves and Jasper Ward. By nightfall, they had descended into a sheltered valley where Blake deemed it safe enough to make camp. As they sat before a small fire, eating a supper of beans and coffee, Kate found herself studying Blake's profile against the firelight. He had killed men today for her, yet his hands were steady as he poured coffee into a tin cup and offered it to her. "Does it ever get easier?" she asked suddenly. "Taking a life." Blake looked at her sharply, then his expression softened. "It shouldn't," he said. "The day it gets easy is the day you lose your humanity." "Is that what happened in Pueblo, the thing Jasper mentioned?" Blake was silent for so long that Kate thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he sighed and set down his cup. 6 months ago, I was tracking a gang that had robbed a payroll wagon, cornered them in Pueblo." His voice was flat, emotionless. "There was a shootout in the town square. A stray bullet, my bullet, hit a boy who was watching from a storefront, 10 years old." Kate felt her heart constrict. "Blake, I'm sorry." "His name was Thomas, son of the local school teacher." Blake stared into the flames. "I laid down my badge that day, couldn't bear to wear it anymore." Kate reached across the space between them and touched his hand. "It was an accident. Doesn't make him any less dead." Blake's fingers twitched beneath hers but didn't pull away. "Doesn't make his mother's eyes any less accusing when I brought her the news." They sat in silence, the crackling of the fire the only sound. Kate understood now why he had helped her, why he had risked his life. He was seeking redemption in the only way he knew how. "What will you do in Denver?" he asked eventually, changing the subject. Kate withdrew her hand, suddenly aware of the intimacy of the gesture. "Find honest work, I hope. I can read and write well enough. Perhaps a shop or an office would hire me." You have family there, Kate shook her head. No family anywhere now, Blake nodded thoughtfully. I know some people in Denver. Decent folks. They might be able to help. Why are you doing all this for me? Kate asked, the question that had been burning in her mind since the saloon. Blake considered before answering. Maybe I'm tired of standing by when I could make a difference. Maybe helping you helps me remember who I was before Pueblo. He looked at her directly. Or maybe there's something about you, Kate Daniels, that makes a man want to be better than he is. The admission hung between them, unexpectedly honest. Kate felt her cheeks warm, and it wasn't from the fire. You should rest, Blake said, breaking the moment. I'll take first watch. As Kate settled into her bedroll, she found herself wondering about the man sitting guard at the edge of the firelight. He carried deep wounds, yet still found the strength to protect others. In the short time she'd known him, he had shown her more kindness than she'd experienced in years. And despite every reason to be cautious, every hard lesson life had taught her about trusting others, Kate realized she was beginning to care for Blake Prescott. That thought followed her into dreams where she no longer crawled from a saloon but walked freely under open skies, her hand clasped firmly in his. The next 3 days of travel brought them through increasingly gentle terrain. As they descended from the high mountains toward the plains where Denver sprawled at the foot of the Rockies. The journey had settled into a comfortable rhythm, riding side by side during the day, making camp at dusk, sharing meals and conversation by firelight. With each passing day, Kate felt strength returning to her body and spirit. The bruises on her face had faded to yellowish smudges, and she no longer winced when mounting her horse. More significant was the internal healing, the growing sense that she was truly free of the past that had trapped her in Georgetown. Blake had proven to be a different kind of man than she had expected. Beneath his guarded exterior, she discovered a man of intelligence and unexpected gentleness. He knew the names of wildflowers that dotted the meadows they passed, could identify birds by their calls alone, and possessed a quiet reverence for the rugged beauty surrounding them. On their final night on the trail, they camped within sight of Denver's distant lights. The sprawling settlement glimmered against the darkening plains like fallen stars. It's bigger than I imagined, Kate said as they sat by their campfire. Growing every day, Blake agreed. The railroads brought thousands west. Will it be easy to disappear there? In case Jasper doesn't heed your warning. Blake considered this. Easy enough if you're careful, but Denver has its own dangers. Kate smiled slightly. I'm becoming quite acquainted with danger, Mr. Prescott. So it seems, Miss Daniels, he replied, a rare smile softening his features. Their eyes met across the fire, and Kate felt a now familiar warmth spread through her chest. These moments had become more frequent during their journey's silent connections that spoke volumes without words. There's something I've been meaning to ask, Blake said, his voice tentative. What are your plans once we reach Denver? Kate looked toward the distant city lights. Find work, as I said. A room somewhere respectable. Build a life free from debts and obligations. Blake nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that. I have a friend who owns a bookshop. He mentioned needing help last time I passed through, if you're interested. You'd recommend me. A woman you barely know, I know enough, Blake said quietly. I know you're brave and resourceful. I know you can handle yourself in a crisis. And I know you deserve a chance at something better than what life has handed you so far. Kate studied him, touched by his faith in her. And what about you? What will you do in Denver? Blake poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks swirling upward. I've been offered work at a ranch outside the city, breaking horses mainly. He hesitated. It would mean staying in one place for a while. The implication hung unspoken between them. Blake Prescott, the drifter, was considering putting down roots at least temporarily. "That sounds like a good opportunity," Kate said carefully, not wanting to presume anything about his motivations. "It could be," Blake agreed, his eyes finding hers again. "Denver's a growing city, plenty of opportunities for folks looking to start fresh." "Are you looking to start fresh, Blake?" The question was bold, more direct than she'd intended, but these days on the trail had stripped away some of the careful barriers between them. Blake was quiet for a long moment. "I've been running for 6 months," he finally said. "From Pueblo, from myself. Maybe it's time to stop." "Because of a ranch job," Kate pressed gently. Blake set down the stick and looked at her directly. "Because for the first time since Pueblo, I find myself thinking about tomorrow instead of yesterday, and that has very little to do with horses." Kate's heart quickened at his words. "Blake," he held up a hand. "I'm not asking anything of you, Kate. You've had enough of men making claims on your future. I'd like to know you're nearby, to know you're safe and building that life you deserve. And if I wanted more than just to be nearby?" Kate asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Blake's expression shifted, hope and caution warring in his features. "Then we'd take it one day at a time. No promises beyond what we can honestly give." Kate nodded, appreciating his careful approach. After Jasper's attempts to control her, Blake's respect for her independence was a precious gift. "One day at a time," she agreed softly. "Starting tomorrow in Denver." As they settled in for their final night on the trail, Kate found herself looking toward the future with genuine hope for the first time in years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, certainly, but also new possibilities. And somehow, knowing that Blake would be part of that future made the prospect less daunting. Denver in 1876 was a city in transformation. What had begun as a rough mining camp was rapidly evolving into the Queen City of the Plains, with brick buildings replacing wooden structures, and signs of civilization spreading outward from its core. Still, it retained a frontier rawness, a place where fortune and ruin stood side by side on dusty streets teeming with humanity. Blake and Kate rode into the city on a busy morning, their travel-worn appearances drawing little notice among the diverse crowd. Cowboys, miners, businessmen in tailored suits, and ladies in fashionable dresses all navigated the bustling thoroughfares. They made their way to Larimer Street, where Blake's friend Samuel Wilson owned Frontier Books and Stationery. The shop was a narrow but deep establishment, with large windows displaying neatly arranged volumes and writing implements. A bell tinkled as they entered, and a bespectacled man in his 50s looked up from behind the counter. His serious expression immediately brightened. "Blake Prescott." "By God, it's been months." He hurried around the counter, extending his hand. Blake shook it warmly. "Good to see you, Sam. Business looks prosperous." "Can't complain," Sam replied, then glanced curiously at Kate. "Sam, this is Miss Katherine Daniels," Blake introduced her. "Kate, this is Samuel Wilson, an old friend and the most honest businessman in Denver." "You flatter me," Sam chuckled before bowing slightly to Kate. "A pleasure, Miss Daniels." Kate smiled, instantly liking the bookshop owner's gentle manner. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Wilson." "Sam mentioned needing help in the shop," Blake explained. "Kate is looking for respectable employment." Understanding dawned in Sam's eyes as he noted Kate's fading bruises. He asked no questions but nodded thoughtfully. "Indeed I do. My last assistant left to get married last month, and I've been overwhelmed since." He studied Kate with kind eyes. "Can you read and write, Miss Daniels?" "Very well, sir. My father insisted on my education." "And do you know your numbers? Can you keep accounts?" "I do. I managed my father's household affairs for several years." Sam smiled. Then I believe you're exactly what I've been looking for. When could you start? Kate glanced at Blake, momentarily overwhelmed by how quickly things were happening. I would need to find lodgings first. There's a boarding house 2 streets over, Sam offered. Owned by a widow named Mrs. Holloway. Very respectable for young working women. I could put in a word. That would be most kind, Kate said, genuine gratitude in her voice, while Sam wrote a note of introduction for Mrs. Holloway. Blake stepped outside to secure their horses. When Kate joined him a few minutes later, he was studying a notice posted on a nearby wall. "Good news?" she asked, noting his thoughtful expression. "The ranch job is still available," he confirmed. "The Bar Cross, about 10 miles east of the city." He hesitated. "It would mean I could ride into Denver regularly." The implication wasn't lost on Kate. "I start at the bookshop tomorrow," she told him, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. "And Mr. Wilson's recommendation should secure me a room at the boarding house." Blake's smile was genuine, reaching his eyes in a way that transformed his face. "You'll do well here, Kate. I can feel it." They stood for a moment in the busy street, suddenly awkward now that their journey was ending. The easy companionship of the trail seemed fragile in the noise and bustle of the city. "I should see you to this boarding house," Blake finally said. Mrs. Holloway's boarding house for young ladies was a well-maintained 3-story structure with a small garden in front. The proprietress, a stern-faced woman with kind eyes, read Sam Wilson's note carefully before appraising Kate. "Mr. Wilson vouches for your character, which carries weight with me," she stated. "I have one small room available on the 3rd floor. The rules are simple. No gentlemen callers above the parlor, no returning after 9 in the evening, and all boarders attend Sunday services." "That sounds perfectly reasonable," Kate assured her. "Very well then. It's $3 weekly, meals included except Sunday dinner." Kate hesitated, the reality of her situation suddenly apparent. She had no money. Blake, sensing her distress, stepped forward. "Allow me to pay the first month in advance, Mrs. Holloway. Miss Daniels will be employed beginning tomorrow." Before Kate could protest, he had placed $12 in the landlady's hand. "That's very generous, sir," Mrs. Holloway remarked with raised eyebrows. "Are you Miss Daniels' guardian?" "A friend," Blake replied simply. "Who knows what it means to start over?" Mrs. Holloway seemed satisfied with this and proceeded to show Kate to her room, a small but clean space with a narrow bed, a dresser, and a window overlooking the garden. "Supper is at 6 sharp, Mrs. Holloway informed her before departing. "Don't be late." When they returned downstairs, Blake was waiting in the parlor, hat in hand. It was time for their parting, and Kate found herself surprisingly reluctant. "I'll repay you," she promised as they stepped outside. "Every dollar." "No hurry," Blake assured her. "Your first earnings should go to necessities." They stood on the boardwalk, the afternoon sun casting long shadows. Around them, Denver continued its ceaseless activity, but for a moment they existed in a quiet space of their own. "I should be on my way to the Bar Cross," Blake said, though he made no move to leave. "New hands are expected before sundown." Kate nodded, suddenly finding words difficult. This man had saved her life, had shown her kindness when she most needed it, and now was helping her begin anew. "How did one properly thank such a person, Blake?" she began, then faltered. "I don't know how to." "You don't need to say anything," he interrupted gently. "Just be well, Kate, be free." On impulse, Kate reached out and took his hand. "When will I see you again?" Something brightened in Blake's eyes. "Hope, perhaps. I usually get Saturdays off. I could ride in if you'd like." "I would like that very much." Blake squeezed her hand before releasing it. "Until Saturday, then." Kate watched him mount his horse and ride away, a curious mixture of emotions swirling within her. Sadness at their parting, certainly, but also excitement for the new beginning before her, and a warm anticipation of Saturday that she didn't quite want to examine too closely. The room at Mrs. Holloway's was sparse, but represented something Kate hadn't possessed in years, a space that was truly hers, free from obligation or fear. She unpacked her meager belongings, smoothing her worn dresses with care. With her first wages, she would need to purchase more suitable attire for working in a bookshop. At precisely 6 o'clock, a bell rang through the house. Kate made her way to the dining room, where 6 other young women were already gathered around a large table. They regarded her with curious but not unfriendly eyes. "Ladies, this is Miss Katherine Daniels, our newest boarder," Mrs. Holloway announced. "She'll be working at Wilson's bookshop." A chorus of greetings followed, and Kate was ushered to a seat beside a plump, cheerful girl who introduced herself as Mary Jenkins. "You'll like it here," Mary whispered as Mrs. Holloway said grace. "The food's good, the beds don't have bugs, and Mrs. Holloway only seems strict until you get to know her." "I'm grateful to have found such a place," Kate replied sincerely. "Was that your beau who brought you?" another girl asked once the meal was underway. The tall fellow with the serious face, Kate felt herself blush. "Mr. Prescott is a friend who helped me during a difficult time. He's taken work at a ranch outside the city." "Well, he's handsome enough to be a beau," the girl persisted with a knowing smile. "And he looked at you like he might want to be." Kate focused on her plate, unsure how to respond. Had Blake looked at her differently? She thought of their conversations by firelight, the growing ease between them, the way he had spoken of wanting to know she was nearby. "We've only just met," she said finally, which was true enough, though the days on the trail had created a bond that seemed to transcend their brief acquaintance. The conversation moved on to other topics: local gossip, work stories, fashion observations. Kate listened more than she spoke, savoring the normal female companionship she had been denied during her time at the saloon. Later, alone in her room, Kate stood by the window looking out at the darkening city. Somewhere out there, Blake was settling into his new position at the Bar Cross Ranch. The thought brought a smile to her lips and a warmth to her chest that had nothing to do with the summer evening. Saturday suddenly seemed very far away. Kate's first day at Frontier Books and Stationery proved both challenging and rewarding. Sam Wilson was a patient employer who took time to explain the inventory system, show her how to operate the cash register, and introduce her to regular customers. The shop attracted a diverse clientele: ranchers seeking agricultural manuals, miners purchasing writing materials to send letters home, mothers looking for school books, and the occasional scholar hunting rare volumes. Kate found herself enjoying the interactions, especially with children who gazed in wonder at illustrated books. By the end of the week, she had settled into a comfortable routine. She rose early, breakfasted with the other boarders, walked the 6 blocks to the bookshop, and worked until 5. Evenings were spent in the boarding house parlor, where the young women gathered to sew, raid, or play the upright piano. Kate used her first wages to purchase 2 serviceable work dresses and necessary toiletries. The remaining money she carefully set aside, mindful of her debt to Blake and her desire for future independence. Saturday dawned bright and clear. Kate awoke with a flutter of anticipation in her stomach, though she tried to temper her expectations. Blake had said he would visit, but ranch work was unpredictable. There was no guarantee he would appear. She worked the morning shift at the bookshop, finding it difficult to concentrate as her eyes kept drifting to the door each time the bell chimed. When noon came with no sign of Blake, she tried to hide her disappointment as Sam suggested she take her lunch break. "Go on," he encouraged. It's a beautiful day. Perhaps eat in the park across the street. Kate nodded and gathered her small lunch bread, cheese, and an apple she had saved from breakfast. As she stepped outside, she nearly collided with a tall figure approaching the shop. "Blake!" she exclaimed, unable to contain her surprise and delight. He stood before her, looking somehow different. He had shaved, his clothes were clean if worn, and he held his hat in his hands rather than wearing it. Most noticeably, the perpetual wariness in his eyes had softened. "Kate," he greeted her, a smile breaking across his features. "You look well." "As do you," she replied, suddenly conscious of her own appearance in her new blue work dress. "Ranch life must agree with you," Blake chuckled. "It's honest work, tiring but good." He glanced at the package in her hands. "Were you heading to lunch?" "Yes, just to the park. Would you care to join me?" "I'd like that very much." They found a bench beneath a cottonwood tree, its leaves providing dappled shade from the summer sun. Kate divided her lunch, insisting Blake accept half despite his protests. "Tell me about the bar cross," she prompted as they ate. Blake described the sprawling cattle operation, the bunkhouse he shared with 5 other hands, the ornery foreman who nonetheless knew his business, and the satisfaction of working with horses. "The owner, James Meredith, is a fair man," he explained. "Pays well and treats his hands with respect. I'm breaking a string of Mustangs for him, work that requires patience rather than force." "That sounds perfect for you," Kate observed. "You have patience in abundance." Blake smiled at the compliment. "And you, how are you finding life in Denver?" Kate told him about the bookshop, her fellow boarders, and her growing familiarity with the city. She spoke with such animation that Blake watched her with evident pleasure, clearly happy to see her thriving. "No sign of trouble?" he asked more seriously. "No word of Jasper?" Kate shook her head. "Nothing. I believe we're truly free of him." "Good," Blake said firmly. "You deserve peace." Their conversation flowed easily, moving from daily concerns to deeper subjects. Kate found herself telling Blake about her childhood in St. Louis, her mother's death from influenza, and her father's decision to seek fortune in the West. In turn, Blake spoke of growing up on a small farm in Missouri, his service during the final year of the war, though he had been barely 16, and his gradual drift westward in the years that followed. "I never planned to be a lawman," he admitted. "It happened by chance. I helped a marshal track down a horse thief, and he offered me a deputy position, said I had a knack for reading people and situations." "You do," Kate agreed. "You certainly read mine correctly at the saloon." Blake's expression grew serious. "There was nothing complex to read there, Kate. You needed help. Anyone with a shred of decency would have done the same." "But they didn't," Kate pointed out softly. "You did." Their eyes met, and that now familiar current passed between them, unspoken but undeniable. For a breathless moment, Kate thought Blake might reach for her hand, might say something about the growing connection they both surely felt. Instead, he looked away, clearing his throat. "I should get you back to the shop. Sam will wonder what's become of you." Kate nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. As they walked back, Blake mentioned that he would be in Denver again the following Saturday. "The ranch hands rotate weekend passes," he explained. "I'll have every other Saturday free." "I look forward to it," Kate said, meaning it wholeheartedly. At the bookshop door they paused, that same awkwardness from their parting at the boarding house returning. "Thank you for lunch," Blake said. "Thank you for coming to see me," Kate replied. For a moment, neither moved. Then Blake suddenly reached out and gently touched her cheek, where the last faint traces of bruising remained. "Be well, Kate Daniels," he said quietly. "Until next time." As he walked away, Kate touched her cheek where his fingers had been, a warmth spreading through her that had nothing to do with the summer heat. Inside the shop, Sam Wilson looked up from his ledger with knowing eyes. "Pleasant lunch." "Very," Kate replied, unable to keep the smile from her voice. Sam nodded sagely. "Blake Prescott is a good man, one of the best I've known despite what he believes about himself." "You know about Pueblo?" Kate asked cautiously. "I do. And I know he carries that burden heavier than most men would." Sam closed his ledger. "He deserves happiness, that one. As do you, my dear." Kate busied herself with straightening a display of writing paper, unsure how to respond to such direct observations about her personal life. "Life offers second chances rarely enough," Sam continued gently. "When it does, wisdom lies in recognizing them." With those words, he retreated to his office, leaving Kate to ponder their meaning as she attended to the afternoon customers. The pattern established itself over the following weeks. Blake would ride into Denver every other Saturday, spend the day with Kate, and return to the bar cross by nightfall. They explored the growing city together, visiting parks and markets, attending a county fair where Blake won her a ribbon at a shooting gallery, and once even attending a theatrical performance when Sam gifted Kate with tickets. With each visit, their ease with one another deepened, and Kate found herself counting days between their meetings. The other boarders teased her good-naturedly about her Saturday beau, and even Mrs. Holloway unbent enough to allow Blake to call for Kate at the boarding house rather than meeting him elsewhere. By late September, the cottonwoods along Cherry Creek had begun to turn golden, and a crispness in the air heralded the approaching autumn. Kate had settled comfortably into Denver life. She had become invaluable to Sam, who had increased her wages and given her greater responsibility in the shop. She had friends among the boarders and had begun saving money in a small account at the Denver Mercantile Bank. Yet for all this progress, there remained an unspoken tension between her and Blake, a line neither had yet dared to cross. They walked arm in arm through the city streets, shared confidences and laughter, and clearly cherished each other's company. But Blake maintained a careful distance, never speaking of feelings that Kate was increasingly certain they both harbored. On the first Saturday in October, Blake arrived at the bookshop with news. "Mr. Meredith has asked me to stay on permanently," he said as they walked along the banks of Cherry Creek. "As head wrangler, overseeing all the horses and training new stock." "Blake, that's wonderful," Kate exclaimed. "Will you accept?" He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I believe I will. It's good work with a future in it." He glanced at her. "And it would mean staying in Colorado, near Denver." The implication hung between them. Near Denver meant near Kate. "I'm glad," she said simply, squeezing his arm where her hand rested. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, watching golden leaves drift into the creek's clear water. Kate gathered her courage, deciding it was time to address what remained unspoken between them. "Blake," she began, her heart quickening, "these past months have meant a great deal to me." He looked down at her, his expression softening. "To me as well, Kate, more than I can say." "Then why don't you say it?" she asked gently. "Why do we pretend there's nothing more between us than friendship?" Blake stopped walking, turning to face her fully. His eyes searched hers, and Kate saw conflict, their hope warring with something that looked like fear. "Kate," he began, then faltered. "You've only just gained your freedom, your independence. I wouldn't want to what? Take that from me." Kate shook her head. "Do you truly believe caring for someone means losing freedom?" "No, but because I don't," she continued, finding courage in the moment. "I believe it can mean finding something greater than what we could achieve alone." Blake's expression was pained. "I'm not the man you deserve, Kate." "What happened in Pueblo was a tragic accident," Kate finished firmly. "One that doesn't define you, no matter how much you believe it should." She reached up and touched his face, a gesture he had made to her that first Saturday, now returned. "The man I've come to know these past months is kind, honorable, and brave. That's the man I see when I look at you, Blake. Not whatever ghost from Pueblo haunts you." Blake closed his eyes briefly at her touch, and when he opened them, Kate saw a vulnerability there he rarely revealed. "I've been alone a long time," he admitted. "Safer that way, simpler." "And is that what you want, safety and simplicity?" Kate challenged gently. "Or could you want something more?" The moment stretched between them, pregnant with possibility. Then, with deliberate slowness, Blake covered her hand with his own where it rested against his cheek. "I want you, Kate Daniels," he said, his voice low and certain. "God help me. I've wanted you since I saw you fighting for your freedom on that saloon floor. But I needed to know you were choosing me freely, not out of gratitude or necessity." Kate felt tears spring to her eyes at his words, at the honor and consideration behind them. "I am choosing," she whispered, "and I choose you, Blake Prescott." He drew her closer then, one hand at her waist, the other still holding hers against his face. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a question asked and answered in the meeting of lips. The second was surer, deeper, a promise exchanged without words. When they finally parted, Blake rested his forehead against hers. "I never expected to find you," he murmured. "Never thought I deserved to." "Perhaps that's not for you to decide," Kate replied with a small smile. "Perhaps some gifts are given regardless of what we think we deserve." Blake laughed softly, the sound filled with wonder. "When did you become so wise, Miss Daniels?" "I had an excellent teacher in resilience, Mr. Prescott." They continued their walk, hands entwined now, the barrier between them finally broken. As the afternoon light gilded the changing leaves, they spoke of the future cautiously at first, then with growing conviction. "Mr. Meredith has a small cabin on the property," Blake explained. "Used to belong to the previous foreman. He's offered it to me as part of the permanent position." "It sounds perfect," Kate said, then blushed at the presumption in her words. Blake squeezed her hand. "It would be, eventually." The implication was clear, and Kate's heart soared at the thought of life together, a home of their own. "I should court you properly first," Blake continued, suddenly formal. "If you'll permit me," Kate laughed, joy bubbling up inside her. "I believe we're well past the need for permission, but yes, Blake Prescott, you may court me to your heart's content." As twilight approached, Blake walked Kate back to the boarding house. At the gate, mindful of Mrs. Holloway's watchful eye from the window, he kissed her hand rather than her lips. "2 weeks," he said. "It will seem an eternity. We've waited this long," Kate reminded him. 2 weeks is nothing." As she watched him ride away, Kate felt a profound sense of completion. From crawling out of a saloon to walking freely through life, her journey had brought her to this moment, to loving and being loved by a man who saw her strength as well as her vulnerability. The road ahead would have its challenges, she knew. But for the first time since her father's death, Kate faced the future not with fear but with anticipation. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The courtship of Katherine Daniels and Blake Prescott became the talk of Mrs. Holloway's boarding house. Every other Saturday, Blake would arrive promptly at noon, always with a small token wildflowers gathered on the ride from the ranch, a ribbon for her hair, or once, a slender volume of poetry he had noticed her admiring in the bookshop. They took their courtship slowly, savoring each moment together. Blake was unfailingly respectful, always mindful of Kate's reputation and Mrs. Holloway's strict rules. They walked through the city parks, attended church services together, and occasionally enjoyed dinner at one of Denver's respectable establishments. On days when Blake couldn't come to town, Kate threw herself into her work at the bookshop. Sam Wilson had promoted her to assistant manager, trusting her to handle ordering and some of the accounting. The position came with increased wages that allowed Kate to purchase new clothing and even save a modest amount each month. "You're blooming, my dear," Sam observed one afternoon as Kate arranged a new display of leather-bound volumes, like a flower finally finding sunlight. Kate smiled, knowing he was right. The frightened, wounded woman who had crawled from the Silver Spur Saloon seemed like a different person, now a ghost from another life. As autumn deepened toward winter, Blake's visits took on a more serious tone. They began discussing the future more concretely, making plans that went beyond vague somedays. On the first Saturday in December, as snow fell gently over Denver, Blake arrived at the boarding house with an unusual request. "I'd like you to visit the bar cross," he said as they sat in Mrs. Holloway's parlor, the only place in the house where gentlemen callers were permitted. "Mr. and Mrs. Meredith have invited you for Sunday dinner tomorrow." Kate's eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's very kind of them, but Mrs. Holloway's rules have been addressed," Blake finished with a small smile. "I've spoken with her. She's agreed to make an exception, provided you return before dark and are properly chaperoned." "Chaperoned?" Kate repeated, confused. "Mary has agreed to accompany us," Blake explained, referring to Kate's closest friend among the boarders. "Her brother works at the bar cross as well, so it's a convenient arrangement." Kate felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness at the prospect. Meeting the Merediths seemed significant, a step toward greater formality in their relationship. "I'd be delighted to accept," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The next morning, Blake arrived with a rented buggy large enough for three. Mary Jenkins, bundled against the December chill, chatted excitedly about seeing her brother as they set off for the Bar Cross Ranch. The 10-mile journey passed quickly despite the cold. Kate found herself increasingly curious about Blake's daily life, the place where he spent his days, and the people who had given him a chance at a new beginning. The Bar Cross spread across rolling plains east of Denver, its boundaries marked by split rail fences and occasional stands of cottonwoods along creek beds. The main house was a substantial two-story structure, with a bunkhouse, barn, and various outbuildings arranged nearby. As they approached, Kate noticed a small cabin set apart from the other buildings, smoke curling from its chimney. Blake followed her gaze and smiled. "The foreman's cabin," he said quietly. "My cabin now." Kate felt her cheeks warm at the implication, and she was grateful for the cold air that provided an excuse for her flushed appearance. James Meredith and his wife Sarah greeted them warmly on the porch of the main house. Meredith was a robust man in his 50s with a weathered face and kind eyes. His wife was a handsome woman with silver-streaked dark hair and a welcoming smile. "So you're the young lady who's captured our Blake's heart," Mrs. Meredith said, taking Kate's hands in hers. "He speaks very highly of you, my dear." "The feeling is mutual," Kate replied, glancing at Blake, who looked slightly embarrassed but pleased. While Mary went to find her brother, the Merediths ushered Blake and Kate inside to a comfortable parlor warmed by a crackling fire. The home was tastefully furnished with a mixture of Eastern refinement and Western practicality, evidence of the Meredith's success in the cattle business. "Blake tells us you work at Wilson's bookshop," Mr. Meredith said as they settled into chairs. "Sam's an old friend. Good man." "He's been very kind to me," Kate agreed. "I've learned a great deal from him." "And before Denver," Mrs. Meredith inquired gently, "Blake mentioned you came from one of the mining towns." Kate hesitated, uncertain how much Blake had shared about her past. She didn't want to lie, but neither did she wish to reveal the full circumstances of their meeting. Blake sensed her discomfort and intervened smoothly. Kate's father was a silver miner who passed away last year. She came to Denver seeking better opportunities. Mrs. Meredith nodded sympathetically. So many come west with dreams that don't quite materialize as hoped, but sometimes life has a way of leading us where we need to be, even through difficult paths. I believe that's true, Kate said, grateful for the woman's tact and understanding. The conversation turned to ranch matters, the coming winter, and news from Denver. Kate observed the easy rapport between Blake and the Merediths, more like family than employer and employee. Dinner was served in a spacious dining room where they were joined by Mary and her brother Thomas, the ranch's bookkeeper. The meal was abundant and delicious, featuring beef from the ranch's own stock and vegetables from Mrs. Meredith's root cellar. As they ate, Kate found herself increasingly drawn to the Merediths. They were educated, thoughtful people who had built something substantial from humble beginnings. Mr. Meredith spoke of coming west with little more than ambition after the war. Mrs. Meredith described teaching school in Denver before their marriage. "We never had children of our own," Mrs. Meredith said wistfully as she served apple pie for dessert. "But the Lord blessed us with this land and good people to share it with." Her gaze lingered on Blake, and Kate suddenly understood the deeper relationship. The Merediths had found in Blake something akin to a son. He had found in them the family connection he had long been missing. After dinner, while Mary visited with her brother, Blake took Kate on a tour of the ranch. They walked arm in arm through the barn where magnificent horses peered curiously from stalls, past corrals where cattle huddled against the cold, and finally to the small cabin that was now Blake's home. "Would you like to see inside?" he asked, his voice carefully neutral. Kate nodded, curious about this private space that was so much a part of him. The cabin was simple but well constructed, with a main room that served as kitchen and living area, and a smaller bedroom visible through a partially open door. A fire burned in the stone hearth, filling the space with warmth and the scent of pine. "It's not much," Blake said, suddenly self-conscious, "but it's solid, weather-tight." "It's lovely," Kate replied honestly. "It feels like a home." Blake's expression softened as he watched her move around the room, noting the few personal touches he had added: books stacked on a small table, a hand-woven blanket across the back of a chair, a coffee pot simmering on the stove. "It could be," he said quietly. "A home, I mean. With the right person." Kate turned to face him, her heart quickening at the look in his eyes. "Blake," he crossed to her in 2 strides, taking her hands in his. "I've been waiting for the right moment," he began, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain. "Planning what I would say, how I would ask, but being here with you, seeing you in this place." He took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. "I love you, Kate Daniels. I think I have since the moment I saw your courage in that saloon, and every day since has only deepened that feeling." His hands tightened on hers. "I'm asking you to share my life, to make this cabin a home, to be my wife." Though Kate had begun to anticipate this moment, the reality of it, the sincerity in Blake's voice, the vulnerability in his eyes overwhelmed her. Tears welled up, blurring her vision. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Blake Prescott, I will be your wife." His smile was radiant as he gathered her into his arms, his kiss conveying all the emotion words couldn't express. Kate returned it with equal fervor, her heart so full it seemed it might burst. When they finally parted, Blake reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "It was my mother's," he explained as he opened it to reveal a simple gold band set with a small pearl. "Not fancy, but it's perfect," Kate interrupted, extending her trembling left hand. Blake slipped the ring onto her finger, where it sat as though it had always belonged there. They stood in the center of the cabin, foreheads touching, The moment suspended in time, a perfect memory being created. "We should go back," Kate said eventually, though reluctantly. "Mary will wonder where we are. And Mrs. Holloway will have my hide if I don't return you before dark," Blake agreed with a rueful smile. As they walked back to the main house, Kate's hand securely in Blake's, she felt a profound sense of rightness. From the darkest moment of her life, crawling away from Jasper Ward's cruelty, had come this miracle. Love, belonging, a future bright with promise. The Merediths' reaction to their engagement was one of genuine delight. Mrs. Meredith embraced Kate warmly, welcoming her to what she called our extended family. Mr. Meredith shook Blake's hand vigorously, then surprised him with a hearty hug. "We hoped this might be in the cards," Mrs. Meredith confessed. "The way Blake spoke of you, we knew his heart was engaged." Mary squealed with excitement when told the news, immediately launching into discussions of wedding plans and dresses. The journey back to Denver was filled with happy chatter, the winter cold forgotten in the warmth of shared joy. At the boarding house gate, Blake kissed Kate's hand formally, mindful of appearances, but his eyes conveyed deeper emotions. "I'll speak with Reverend Thompson next Saturday," he promised. "See about publishing the banns." "How soon?" Kate asked, not caring if she seemed eager. Blake smiled. "Spring would be traditional, but I'd marry you tomorrow if you wished it." "Spring," Kate agreed reluctantly. "It will give us time to prepare properly." As she watched him drive away with Mary, Kate touched the pearl ring that now adorned her finger. From the window of the boarding house, Mrs. Holloway observed her with knowing eyes, having already noticed the new adornment. "I see congratulations are in order, Miss Daniels," she said when Kate entered the parlor. "Thank you, Mrs. Holloway," Kate replied, unable to contain her smile. "We hope to marry in the spring." The older woman nodded approvingly. "Mr. Prescott is a fine man, steady, respectful." Her stern expression softened slightly. "I wish you every happiness, my dear." The following day, Kate shared her news with Sam Wilson, who reacted with genuine pleasure. "I couldn't be happier for you both," he declared, embracing her in a fatherly hug. "Blake deserves joy after all he's endured, and so do you, my dear." "I'll continue working until the wedding," Kate assured him, "and perhaps even after if you'll have me." Sam waved away the suggestion. "We'll discuss all that later. For now, enjoy your happiness. It's a precious thing." News of the engagement spread quickly through Kate's small circle in Denver. Her fellow boarders threw an impromptu celebration in the parlor, serving tea and cakes while exclaiming over her ring and offering advice about married life. The winter months passed in a flurry of preparations. Kate began assembling a modest trousseau, sewing linens in the evenings and saving for household necessities. Blake worked on improvements to the cabin, adding shelves and a larger cook stove, and putting aside a portion of each month's wages. Their Saturdays together became even more precious as they planned their shared future. They discussed children, both wanted several. Finances, they would be comfortable though never wealthy. And dreams, Blake hoped eventually to have a small herd of his own. Kate thought she might like to teach once they had settled. In February, a letter arrived that momentarily clouded their happiness. The Denver sheriff had received word from Georgetown that Jasper Ward had been killed in a dispute over a card game. The news brought mixed emotions for Kate: relief that they need never fear his reappearance, but also a strange sadness for a life so squalidly ended. "He made his choices," Blake said gently when he saw her troubled expression. "As we all do," Kate nodded, understanding the truth in his words. She had chosen to crawl away from that saloon rather than submit. Blake had chosen to help her. Together, they had chosen love over fear, hope over bitter experience. Those choices had led them here, to the cusp of a life together. Spring came early to the Colorado plains that year. By mid-March, the snow had melted, and the first brave shoots of green were appearing in Mrs. Holloway's garden. Blake and Kate set their wedding date for the first Saturday in April, to be held in the small chapel where they now attended services together. The ceremony was simple but deeply meaningful. Kate wore a new dress of pale blue silk, her one extravagance, with her mother's cameo at her throat. Blake, looking almost uncomfortable in a new black suit, waited for her at the altar with a mixture of nervousness and joy on his face. Sam Wilson gave Kate away. The Merediths sat in the front pew as Blake's family, and Mary Jenkins served as bridesmaid. Reverend Thompson spoke eloquently about love's redemptive power and the courage required to build a life together. When Blake and Kate exchanged vows, their voices were clear and certain, having already been tested by circumstances far more challenging than most couples faced before marriage. The gold band that joined Blake's mother's ring on Kate's finger was simple but solid, like the man who placed it there, like the foundation they had built together. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Thompson declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder." Blake's kiss was tender yet possessive, a promise of the life they would now share. As they turned to face their small gathering of friends, Kate felt a profound sense of completion. From crawling away from one life, she had walked steadily toward another, one built on love, respect, and mutual strength. The wedding breakfast was held at the Merediths' Denver townhouse, a surprising gift they had kept secret until the ceremony. Champagne flowed, toasts were offered, and even Mrs. Holloway unbent enough to wish the couple many years of harmonious companionship. When the time came to depart for the Bar Cross, Kate embraced Mary and her other friends from the boarding house with genuine affection. Sam Wilson kissed her cheek and pressed a package into her hands, a rare, illustrated edition of Tennyson's poems that she had often admired in the shop. "For quiet evenings by the fire," he said with a wink. The drive to the ranch was filled with a new awareness that they were truly beginning their life together, that the cabin awaiting them was now their home, that the night ahead would bring a deeper intimacy than they had yet known. Blake seemed to sense her thoughts, reaching over to take her hand. "Nervous?" he asked gently. "A little," Kate admitted, "but not afraid." His smile was tender. "Never again will you need to be afraid, Kate Prescott, not while I draw breath." The name, her new name, sent a thrill through her. Kate Prescott, wife of Blake. No longer defined by her father's legacy or Jasper Ward's cruelty, but by her own choices and the love she had found. When they arrived at the Bar Cross, they found the cabin transformed. Mrs. Meredith had clearly been busy during the ceremony and breakfast, for the simple dwelling now boasted fresh curtains at the windows, new linens on the bed visible through the bedroom door, and a table set with a white cloth, and their first meal as husband and wife warming on the stove. "Welcome home, Mrs. Prescott," Blake said softly as he carried her across the threshold. Kate's heart swelled with emotion as she took in their small domain. "It's perfect," she whispered. That evening, as twilight settled over the plains, they sat on the cabin's small porch watching the stars appear. Blake's arm was around Kate's shoulders, her head resting against him in a posture that already felt familiar and right. "I never thought I'd have this," Blake admitted, his voice low in the gathering darkness. "After Pueblo, I believed I'd always be alone, that it was what I deserved." Kate placed her hand over his heart. "And now I know better," he said simply. "Now I understand that life offers second chances to those willing to take them." He turned to look at her, his expression visible in the light spilling from the cabin windows. "You were my second chance, Kate. From the moment you crawled away from that saloon, determined to be free. And you were mine, she replied softly. The moment you said I could walk free from there. Their kiss beneath the Colorado stars sealed a covenant begun months before a promise to honor the precious second chance they had found in each other's arms. 10 years later, the Bar Cross Ranch had changed significantly. James Meredith, recognizing Blake's industry and intelligence, had gradually made him a partner in the operation. When Meredith's health began to fail in the 8th year, he and his wife moved permanently to their Denver home, leaving Blake to manage the ranch entirely. The small foreman's cabin had been expanded twice to accommodate the growing Prescott family. First came William, born exactly 9 months after their wedding, with his father's serious eyes and his mother's determination. 2 years later, Elizabeth joined them, a laughing child with Blake's smile and Kate's auburn hair. Their youngest, Michael, had just celebrated his 3rd birthday, a surprise blessing when Kate had believed her childbearing years were behind her. The ranch prospered under Blake's management. His expertise with horses had led to a profitable sideline in breeding and training quality mounts for the Army and wealthy Denver families. Kate had established a small school in what had once been the bunkhouse, teaching not only their own children but those of the other ranch families who had settled nearby. On a warm spring evening, not unlike the one 10 years earlier when they had sat as newlyweds on their porch, Blake and Kate watched their children play in the yard. William was teaching Elizabeth to throw a lasso, while little Michael toddled after them, determined to keep up with his siblings. "Do you ever think about it?" Blake asked, his fingers idly stroking Kate's where their hands rested entwined on the porch swing. That day at the Silver Spur, Kate considered the question. "Less often now," she admitted. "It seems like a different lifetime, a different person." Blake nodded thoughtfully. "I had a letter from Sam yesterday. Did I tell you?" "No, what did he say?" "Georgetown is nearly a ghost town now. The silver played out and most folks moved on." Blake squeezed her hand. "The Silver Spur burned down last winter. No one was hurt, but the building's gone." Kate absorbed this news, surprised by the complexity of her emotions. The saloon had been the site of her greatest humiliation, yet also the place where her life had changed irrevocably for the better. "Good," she said finally. "That chapter is truly closed now." Blake studied her profile in the fading light. At 32, Kate was more beautiful to him than she had been at 22. Motherhood and happiness had softened her features while strengthening her spirit. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. "About the path that led us here." Kate turned to face him, reaching up to trace the silver at his temples that had spread over the years. "Not one," she said firmly. "Every step, even the painful ones, brought me to you, to our children, to this life we've built. How could I regret any of it?" Blake's expression softened with love and gratitude. "I thank God every day for you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "For the courage that made you crawl away from that saloon, and for whatever providence put me in your path that day." Kate leaned forward to kiss him, a gesture as natural after 10 years as breathing. "And I thank God for the man who told me I could walk free," she whispered against his lips. Their moment was interrupted by William's triumphant shout as his small lasso settled around a fence post, and Elizabeth's demands to try next. Blake and Kate laughed, separating to call their children in for supper. As twilight deepened into night, and after the children were tucked into bed with stories and prayers, Blake and Kate returned to their porch. The stars spread above them in the vast Colorado sky, the same stars that had witnessed their beginning, now bearing silent testimony to all they had become. "I love you, Kate Prescott," Blake said softly in the darkness, "more with each passing day." Kate's hand found his, a perfect fit after all these years. "And I love you, Blake Prescott. Yesterday, today, and all our tomorrows." From crawling away from a saloon to walking freely through life, from a stranger's kindness to the deepest love, their journey had come full circle. What had begun in desperation had transformed into something beautiful and enduring, a testament to second chances, to courage, and to the healing power of love freely given and gratefully received. In the quiet of the Colorado night, surrounded by the home and family they had built together, Blake and Kate Prescott held fast to each other, secure in the knowledge that whatever the future might bring, they would face it as they had faced their past, side by side, hand in hand, heart to heart. And they would walk free together, always.